Hello guys, welcome to Java programming tutorial video. In today's tutorial, we are going to learn about object-oriented concepts in Java. So in this tutorial, we are going to learn about the object-oriented concepts together with a practical implementation. So it's not just we are going to learn about the theory, at the same time we are going to implement a Java program that explains each of those object-oriented concepts. As I said, the objective for the today's class is this. First, we are going to revise the object-oriented concepts in Java. I don't know whether if you have done some object-oriented programming before, such as C# or C++. In case if you have done that one, so it's going to be the revision for you. In case if you have not done any object-oriented programming, don't worry, because I'm going to explain you what is object-oriented programming and the concepts that you need to know about object-oriented programming. Then the second objective is we are going to implement the Java program to understand each of those object-oriented concepts. So now let's get started. First, I want you to know what is object-oriented programming, because as I say that Java is object-oriented programming, yes of course, but you should know exactly what is object-oriented programming. So object means a real world entity. It can be a pen, pencil, chair, table, computer, human, watch, anything. You know those objects, right? So here now we are going to learn about object oriented programs. So what does that mean? The name itself is there. So we are going to learn something related to the object. So it can be anything, such as I say that a real world entity such as a pen, chair, table, computer, it can be anything. So object oriented programming is a methodology or a paradigm to design a program using classes and object. So you might be wondering, so okay, object oriented programming is we are going to learn about the object, we are going to treat everything as an object. So what does that mean, these classes and objects? So how are we going to treat that object into classes? And so maybe you're a bit confused, right? What does that mean, class, and what does that mean, objects? Don't worry, I'm going to explain you in the next slides about what is class and what is object. By that time you will understand exactly what is classes and objects in object oriented programming. So as for now, you just have to know object oriented programming is a methodology or a paradigm to design a program using classes and objects. Second one is, okay, well, we know object-oriented programming, we are going to treat everything as an object. So to implement the program, we are going to use class and objects. That's okay. Then why object-oriented program? What is the need? Is there any use for us to use the object-oriented programming? Because before object-oriented programming, I'm sure that you know we were using procedural programming, right? Example, I would say programming with C, a C program. So C program is not an object-oriented programming where we don't use class and objects to implement the program. There we just use procedures. C programming is a procedure programming. Now this object-oriented programming is the next level. Maybe I would say it's a next upgrade of that procedural programming. So why object-oriented programming? The simple, the major objective of object-oriented programming is to eliminate some of the flaws encountered in the procedural approach. That is the reason why we have decided to use the object-oriented programming instead of using the procedural approach. So in this object-oriented programming, this object-oriented program treats data as a critical element in the program development and does not allow it to flow freely around the system. So what is the use of this one? When you don't allow the data to be move or maybe flow freely around the system, so what will happen in that case? The data will be protected, isn't it? So because yes, we can have the data in our system, but in some cases it needs to be protected. Some cases you need to deny the access to some people, right? So even though that data is there in the program, but in some cases you need to protect that data from unauthorized access. So in that case we can use object oriented program to protect that data from flowing freely throughout the program, right? So in that is the reason why object oriented programming is being introduced. Then third one is it ties the data more closely to the functions that operate on it and protects it from unintentional modification by other functions. That's the reason why I told you, if it is a procedural, it's easy for someone to modify the data that you have in your program. But in object oriented programming, that one is not possible because of the object oriented concept of encapsulation that we are going to learn in the later part of the tutorial. So we will learn what does that mean, confidentiality, how to hide the information from unauthorized access. So in short, when you use the object oriented programming, data is safe. You can keep the confidential data, but whereas in the procedural programming language, keeping the data against unauthorized access is very difficult. So that's the reason why we have using the object oriented programming. Then object oriented programming allows us to decompose the problem into a number of entities called objects, and then build the data and functions in object oriented programming. We call them as a method around these entities. So the combination of data and method will make up an object. So what does that mean, object? The combination of data and the method is the one who is going to make an object. So the data of an object can be accessed only by the method associated with that object. So in case if you don't understand this point, when I explain you the program part, you were able to understand what do I mean to say. The data of an object can be accessed only by the methods associated with that object, right? Finally, however, methods of one object can access the methods of other objects. Even this one, in case if you don't understand, I will explain you with a practical example for the better understanding. So as for now, you have to know methods of one object can access the method of other objects. In object oriented programming, when we say methods, is nothing but functions. In C programming, we call them as a functions, right? Function is a individual model to do the particular task. In methods, in object oriented programming, we use methods to do the particular task. We will see them in the later part of the tutorial. So what are all the features of object oriented programming? Object oriented programming emphasis on the data rather than the procedure. Programs are divided into objects, then data is hidden, therefore it cannot be accessed by the external function. Then objects may communicate with each other through methods. Finally, I would say new data and methods can be easily added whenever it is necessary. So these are all the important features of object oriented programming. Finally, now we have come to the place where to learn about the basic concept of object oriented programming. Actually, object oriented programming has got some specific features. First one, I would say classes and object. As I said that in object oriented programming, we create programs with the help of classes and objects. So that classes and object is the first part of object oriented concept. Then the second one is inheritance. So the third one is polymorphism. The fourth one is data abstraction and encapsulation. So these four are the core concept of object oriented programming: classes and objects, inheritance, polymorphism, data abstraction and encapsulation. We are going to learn each of these things in detail with a practical implementation. As for now, what you need to know is the basic concept of object oriented programming is the first one. The first and foremost important thing that you need to know about object oriented programming is a class and objects, inheritance, polymorphism, data abstraction and encapsulation. So these four are the object oriented concept in Java programming. In most of the object oriented programming, this is the four important things that they should have, right? So now let us learn about these classes and objects. Then I will show you how to create a class and how to create the object for that particular class. Are you excited? Let's get started with class and objects. First one is objects. So what is objects? Object is nothing but an instance of a class. So object is nothing but, as I said, an instance of a class. You might be wondering, what does that mean, instance of a class? I will show you in programming so that you will be able to understand. So an object in Java is the physical as well as the logical entity. When I say object, as I said, it can be pen, pencil, computer, laptop, bag, chair, desk, book, apple, backboard. It can be anything. So all these things we call them as an object. An entity that has a state and behavior is known as an object. For example, let's take this pen as an object. So each object will have an entity that has a state and behavior. So what is the state of this object pen? State is nothing but, maybe it can be blue, black, white. That's the state of the pen object. Maybe when I say, what is the behavior of this pen object? Writing. Behavior in the sense, what is it used for? That is a behavior, right? So usually we use pen for writing, right? So this pen object, the behavior is writing. When you say what is the state of this object pen, it can be blue or black or green, or you can even call the name of the brand. Let's say Reynolds is the name of the brand. So that's a state. So this is object in Java. So as you can see them here, there is a 3 characteristics of object. As I said, state. So state represents the data of an object. In that case, I would say, let's take pen as an object. In that case, what is state? The pen can have maybe red color, blue color, black color. So that is a state. Behavior. Behavior represents the behavior, or we can say functionality of an object, such as deposit, withdraw. In that same example that I said, for the pen object, the behavior is writing. What is it used for? We use pen for writing, right? So that is a behavior. Then the third characteristics of an object is identity. For example, if you have got a different pens, how can you identify that different pen? With an ID. Let's say maybe this is a Reynolds, this is a different brand. Maybe let's say this brand is Natraj, this brand, maybe this brand of the pen is XYZ. So that is an identity. How can you identify the pen? Maybe with some unique ID, right? So this pen is this identity. Maybe blue pens, they are different identity. Red pens, different identity. So that is the next characteristics of an object. So identity is nothing but, an object identity is typically implemented via a unique ID, just to differentiate the different object, right? So the value of the ID is not visible to the external user. However, it is used internally by the Java virtual machine to identify each object uniquely. So these 3 are the important characteristics of an object. I hope now you have understood what is object in object-oriented programming. The next part is class. So what is class? A class is a group of objects which have common properties. It is the template or a blueprint from which objects are created. I don't know whether it is making sense or not. So let me say this one in short. So class is a group of objects. So object is what? Which nothing but, we can say pen, right, is an object. Chair is an object. Apple is an object, right? So class is nothing but a group of objects. For example, you cannot, then not necessarily when you want to, let's say, take apple as an example object, right? So apple is a fruit, right? So you can say apple is an object from the class fruit, right? So apple is a fruit. So you can have grapes, bananas, everything as those are all the fruits, right? Grapes, bananas, apple, they are all fruits, but they all comes under the class of fruits, isn't it so? So here, when I say class, we can say class is a fruit. In that class fruit, we can have objects such as apple, orange, bananas, grapes. So that is how we create class. So class is a group of objects which have common properties. So when I say common properties, let's say when it comes to the fruits, we can say the color of the fruit, the taste of the fruit, those stuff, they are common properties, right? When I take a student as a class, a student, they can have common properties such as student IDs, departments, a student name, So class is a group of objects which can have common properties. So in order to create a class in Java program, I'm sure that even in the previous tutorial we have seen how to create a simple program to print the hello world message. If you remember that tutorial, I'm sure that I've talked about how to create a class and how to create a method inside the class using the static method and the non-static method, and then I have even showed you how to create the object for that particular method in order to access the value of that class. So in case if you want to see that one, kindly watch that other tutorial where I taught about the basic program. Even if you don't watch that one, let me explain you again how to create a class and object, so that we will see how to access the properties or the methods of a class using objects. So in order to create a class, here is the syntax. We are going to use class as a keyword followed by name of the class. So this class is a collection of fields and methods. Fields, which is nothing but the data members. What do I mean to say data member? Let's say the data members is nothing but it's like a data type where we are going to create a data type. Methods is nothing but, as I said, that in other words we can say functions. So in object oriented programming we don't call them as a functions, we call them as a methods, where we are going to get the input, where we are going to set the input. So this is a basic syntax for us to create a class. Let me show you a simple program using class and object. So we know class is a group of objects which can have common properties. So it is a template or a blueprint from which objects are created. So this is a syntax. So object is nothing but an object in Java is the physical as well as the logical entity. As I say, that an entity that can have a state and behavior, right? So let me show you this simple example of how to create class and object. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open my NetBeans IDE here. So I'm going to my file, new project. These things you know already because I taught you in the previous tutorial. Select the Java application, next. So here in the project name, let me call this one as a student, because I need to create fields and the methods according to that syntax that we have seen for the class, right? So I want to create the main method, so I'm going to tick this box. So click finish there. It's going to create the project for us. So here we go. The package is student. The name of the class is student. So as I showed you here, let me just split the screen so that it's easy for you to understand. So here I told you the syntax for the class is we are going to have the class as a keyword, as you can see them here, followed by name of the class. So the name of the class in this case is student. So what does that mean? This public is an access specifier. I'm sure that we have learned about this access specifier in the previous class. Even if you delete this one, nothing would happen, because if you don't put anything, by default is going to be a default access specifier, right? So this is a simple structure of a class where we are going to have a class as a keyword followed by the name of the class. So inside we are going to have data members, or we can say we are going to have fields. So for example, when it comes to the student, what fields can we have? We can say string. A student can have name, right? Then I can say integer, maybe ID. So these two are fields, like here, string name and then integer ID. So these two are the fields for the class students. Is it okay? Then we need to create a method. So how are we going to create a method? I'm sure that even in the previous tutorial I showed you. Maybe you can say void, I can say student details as a name of the method. So inside, let me say I'm going to say system.out.println. So here let me say I'm just going to print something, saying here, let's say this one is a student details, right? So here, as you can see them here, what I have done, I have created two fields, string, the name of the student, then integer, So instead of ID, let me call this one as a student ID so that it can make sense, right? So here these two are the fields. So this one is a method, right? Now this is my main function. Remember, now we are going to create the object for the class. How to create the object for the class? Even in the previous tutorial, I told you have to take the name of the class, followed by you need to create an object. Let me say stu, then followed by equals new. So what is the use of this new keyword? This new is a keyword. So what is the use of this new keyword? This new keyword will allocate the memory for the object that we are creating them here. So the use of this new keyword is to create the memory for the object that we are creating here for the class student. So here after new, we are going to have the class name student and then this semicolon. Now we have created the object for the class student. As I said, a class will have the collection of fields and the method. An object is an instant of a class. So this is an object. This object is the instance for this class. Is it clear? Right. Now, if you want to access the method, so what is the method here? Void student details, right? So if you want to access this method inside this main class, what you need to do? You have to get the object. So what is the object that we have created here? stu with dot operator. Then you need to call the method. What is the name of the method here? The name of the method is student detail. So when you put dot, and then you will see some options here. So what you are going to take them here is the student details. Why student details? Because that is the name of the method that I have created. Save and run. So go there in case if you want to run, go to the source file, go to the package student. So this one, right click, run. So it says student details. So it is, we have managed to print the information or the message within this method student details. So what if I want to set the name and the student ID for the students? What can I do? In that case, what if I want to print the name of the student and ID? How am I going to do that? It's simple. So here you can say in the next line, okay, we are going to print the student details first, then followed by what we are going to do, come here, you are going to have the object stu dot, then so now what I'm going to do, I want to print the name and the ID for the students. So in that case, I'm going to take the object dot, what is the name of this data type here? I mean the variable name, right? Student dot name. I'm going to set the name here. Let me say Ranjan. Okay, again I'm going to take the object, and then what I want to set them here is a student ID. So stu ID, select this one, maybe give the ID here 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Right, now what I want to do, I just want to print. If you want to print, what you need to do, system dot out dot println. So what do you want to print now? You want to print the student name and the ID. So if you want to print the student name and the ID, how can you print them? I would say stu dot, what I want to print them here is a name. Okay, then let me just give some space, then I want to print them together with the stu dot student ID. Is that clear? So now I have assigned the values here, and then I'm trying to print. So when I run this one now, let me go there. Now you can see I have print the details, student details Ranjan together with the name of the student and then the student number. So this is how you can use the class and object in Java programming. So I hope this part is clear. If you have got any questions, don't forget to ask me through comment section.